me.
Would y'all like to see
How many of you have heard me tell stories? Son of a gun, the world's improving. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, just let me start. My name is Gary Carden. I'm a 91-year-old storyteller. Yeah. I'm in a wheelchair, which you can see, and I'm also hearing impaired, and I'm a little slow on a lot of things, but I'll try to be sharp and to the point. I was born in the Silva, North Carolina on January 20th, 1935. Began with an accident. The newspaper made the mistake of listing me in new birth as a girl. Welcome, Gary Carden, the daughter of so-and-so and so forth. My father was a mountain musician, and he was pretty good. Everybody told me that. I grew up hearing that as long as I can remember, clear up until when I was going to college, people stopping me and saying, I heard your daddy play. And my daddy was John Lyndon Carden, and he did have a special talent that even went to Asheville and played on a radio station over there. And then he had a string band that he took around to Bryson City, say, and Franklin. He even went to Walhalla. He went to Nashville one or two times. He was a popular fella and well liked, and so he was called HAP, H-A-P, for Happy. He opened a service station in Moody Bottom, and that's how he made his living. And one of the things that bothered my grandmother was the fact that he had too many loafers hanging around that station with instruments, and that when there was no business, they played. And so they played a lot. It's also true that one night a drunk came staggering into that little service station and killed my father. That's a story that I tell frequently. I probably may not tell it tonight, but it was always a mystery. We never knew why he did it. He just staggered in with an old rusty gun that didn't even look like it should have fired, and walked over and pointed it at my father, and my father says, "Don't point that thing at me," and he shot him in the top of the head when he bent over. His friends grabbed him up quickly and rushed out to the car, took him to the hospital, and at that time the hospital was above the courthouse in Silva. They turned the car over on the fountain down at town, right there where the fountain is. You turned left and went up to the hospital. They wrecked the car, and so they had to get my father out of that wrecked car. I guess he was probably already dead, and take him on to the hospital. I met a woman who told me that later on, same night, they really got on with some things back then. They had a wake for my father in my grandparents' home, and there he was already in a coffin, same day he had been killed. And there was my mother sitting by the coffin, and there I was, the lady told me, 2 years old, saying, "When's Daddy coming home?" Every few minutes. And of course, he was already home. I lost my mother as well. She tried to run the station, and it wasn't meant for a shy little girl to run anything. And so she failed. She finally left me with my grandparents and told them, I'm going to Nashville. I'm going to business school. I'm going to be a secretary. I'll come back and get Gary Neal when I'm a secretary. She never came back. And so, with want for a better thing to do, I was left with my grandparents, my paternal grandparents. They weren't all that thrilled at having me, I can assure you. They were in their 60s. What are they going to do with a strange kid like me? They said that they always thought I was retarded, and they did. Only they called it bad blood. If you got bad blood back then, there was no hope for you. That meant, love can't save you. Education can't save you. Nothing can. You've had to lick. So they always said that I was not quite right and not very bright. Now, from the beginning, I found a clever way to make a living. I would listen to radio drama, and I was listening to The Lone Ranger, and I was listening to, let's see, the Canadian thing, Captain, what was his name? Sergeant York, and his wonder dog, King. And I would listen to those stories, and then I would go to school the next day. And when we ate lunch in the pine thicket down at the end of the playground, I would tell them, Sergeant York, the story again, and play all the parts. Whoa, whoa, that's King. I always barked. Well, Preston, you fool, you think you have me? That was the villain. His name was Pierre. Always in every story. For a while. I used to go to the barn and rehearse. I even had a sense of wanting to be good when I told that story. And I was up there one night with King, and I told King, Pierre, the evil traitor, is right there. He's in that tunnel. Go in there and get him. And, of course, the dog said, whoa, 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 whoa. Drugged him out and left him out there. And he jumped up and said, Pierre cannot be captured. Goodbye, Preston. And he was gone. This was a bad night because my grandfather came up to get some hay down for the cow. And he heard these people talking, and he didn't know who they were. He came back down the steps and fled to the house and told my granny, there's a dog up there barking, and there's some strange guy with a French accent, and I don't know what's going on in there, but I went back after a while. There was nobody up there. Nobody. It's this weird young'un we're raising. He's a strange kid. He was up there playing all the parts and telling a story, which bothers me. It always bothered me. He built a house, and boy, he did a wham-bang job, but it's a house that he wanted to live in the rest of his life, and he did a good job, but he never finished the attic. And so it finally turned out up in the attic, he had a feather bed, and he dragged the feather bed over to the window. And on special nights, when it rained and you could hear it howling on that tin roof out there, ding, 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 he came up there to sleep. I followed him. He didn't like that. And it was, now hush, Carnegie, quit talking. Good Lord. And I was worried about, the place was full of wasps flying all over, like little helicopters all over the place. Ever been stung one by one, you don't forget it. And he's Gary Neal. He didn't call me Gary Neal, he called me Garnell. Never could say my name. Garnell! Hush! Get in the bed and hush. So I got in the bed and hushed and went to sleep and dreamed of cowboys and somewhere along about 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and the house was shaking. You think that we had a big flood here just a couple of years ago. This was the same thing, but there was no people. 50 years ago, all the things that were damaged in that mess that came through here recently weren't built, the birds weren't there. It just washed the bridges away and did a lot of damage. I mean, it left a lot of big rocks basically in people's passages, But I woke up and my grandfather was already up and he says, "We've got a flash flood is what we've got." I said, "A flash flood?" "Yeah." He says, "Look where it's coming from." And I looked and it was coming, there was no water there, there wasn't a stream. It's coming out of the pasture. Came right down out of the pasture, jumped the road and come up in the yard and went down the little branch that ran. And it was taking everything away. And so my granddaddy called my grandmother and says, "Agnes, we're going to have to go and move the cow to a higher place." And we could hear her, moo. She was upset. Moo. Water was probably up to her knees. And so they went off to rescue the cow and left me on the porch. And I had a great idea. I decided I didn't have a playmate. I hadn't had a playmate in a long time. Everybody that moved into the Rose Cove, as soon as they got a job in, I don't know, Gastonia or some other place, they moved out and went on. So I decided that this was a marvelous chance to find some playmates. So I went into my granny's canning house and I got her mason jars. And I brought them out and I lined them up on the porch, And I got my Blue Horse notebook and I sat down by them and I wrote notes. I said, "Hello, my name's Gary Neal Carton. I live in Rhodes Cove. I read Superman. I listen to the squeaking door. I drink Pepsi Cola. Come and play with me." And I rolled that up and put it in that jar and threw that jar out there into the float, and here it went. And I threw away about 30 of my granny's canning jars, And when my Uncle Albert came that evening, and I didn't know much about the world, I said to my Uncle Albert, where does the creek go?" And he's all, "Gary Neal, they go down to the Tuckasegee, and then it finally gets to the Mississippi, and I don't know where, I guess it ends up in the Gulf of Mexico. Your jars may be in the Gulf of Mexico." And I was fascinated. And when I went back and things started washing off the hill, I decided it was only fair to tell my granny what was happening. She was cooking in the kitchen. That's her answer to everything. Cook! So she's in there fixing a great breakfast, And so the first thing that comes down, all of a sudden, here comes a dead chicken, comes washing down from the farm up on the hill. And here come a lot of lumber, and here come a lot of walnuts, and here come a lot of, I don't know, firewood. Good Lord, there's somebody's clothes washing through here. And I told my granny, "Dead chicken!" She says, "Hush, you're acting like your mother's people," which she had poor opinion of my mother. And I said, "There's a rabbit out, a rabbit box coming. Here comes a rabbit box. That belongs to Jerry Bryson. There it went. Woo." And she came out and she says, "Gary Neal, please hush. People can hear you. They're going to think you're crazy, hollering and yelling. Shut up." And so I did. And life went on. But I went out every day and sat on the porch after that, waiting for somebody to come up the hill with one of my jars. Never happened. My granny asked me, "You think you can ever find some of my jars and get them back?" I said, "No, Granny, I don't know where they are." And on life went. Of course, I grew up and became a teacher, and then I got into elder hostels. And I taught elder hostels. Loved it. I was supposed to tell people about Appalachian culture and how mountain people were. And I always told this story about the mason jars in the flood, which is, the story of the first flood when it come down the hill like that. And I had a lot of sweet people in the elder hostel. And they went home and wrote me letters, and some of them sent me mason jars. But life went on, as it has a habit of doing. Do any of you want to ask me a question about anything? I can go endlessly. I don't know how to hush. Question?
What size mason jars were they? What size mason jars?
My granny's mason jars were about that high. I've got a couple of them in the room right now. They were just medium high. Put the canning rubber on there and put the screw on there with a lid, and there was no opening it. And I wonder where they all are. Maybe they're in the Gulf of Mexico. I had a dream once that Deborah Pageant got one of my jars. Y'all don't know who Deborah Pageant was. She was this beautiful, blue-eyed Navajo in Broken Arrow, the movie. God, she was pretty. And I decided that she came up one day with one of my jars and come up right to the steps and says, "Hey, Gary, let's play." Oh, shucks. On we go. Question about anything if anybody wants to ask me.
What was it like when, I assume you were on your own for the first time because you had very elderly grandparents, and what was it like when you stepped out? And
When I did what?
when you were on your own, no longer having your grandparents there to look after you, and you stepped out on your own?
The principal at school, I had polio, I had all the bad breaks. I had polio, and that gave me crooked spine here, messed me up good. And the principal of the school said, "Gary, where are you going to college?" And I said, "I don't think I'll be going." He says, "Go home and ask your grandfather if I knew of a way you could go to college, would he approve?" So I went home and asked him. He said, "No. I don't see any point in putting you into college. You don't have common sense. Let's just forget it, okay?" So I went back and told the principal. He said no. He says, "How do you feel if I just do it anyway? Let me tell you something, Gary. You have scoliosis. That gets you, whether you know it or not, a vocational rehab scholarship. You can go to college on your messed up polio back." And so he sent me to Bryson City, and I went, and he told the doctor, "Write down what he has," and he wrote it down, and I brought it back, and he read it and said, "Scoliosis, that's good." I said, "That's good?" He says, "Yeah, I can get you a scholarship with that." And so I went to scholarship. But I went as a day student, and I don't think there's any worse thing to go into college as a day student. Nobody should do that. It is not any fun. We ate our lunch every day in the back seat of our cars and our bologna sandwiches. And of course, there was a college life going on out there, but we were not part of it. We went to class, came out, got in our car, went back to Silva. I was always back in the pool room by 9 o'clock, and sometimes by 6 that afternoon. No, I decided I wanted to go to college, and so I got down to the cafeteria and got a job washing trays, and they gave me a check, and I went up to the dorm room and rented a room, and lo and behold, I was a real college student. And so then I got the real thing, you know. I immediately joined the theater group, and when it was in every play they gave. I immediately joined the newspaper staff and wrote for all the newspaper articles the whole time I was there. Became a genuine college graduate, and I went off to teach school. Went to Cartersville, Georgia the first time. Well, it wasn't really the first time, but it was the first one that counted. Taught there for 5 years. And now let me jump 60 years to the future. I went broke about a year ago. I was described as unable to support himself anymore, doesn't have a way to make a living. But of course I tell stories, and I thought that was a way. But they were right, I would run out of money. And so they sent me here. That's why I'm sitting here in this room now, is because I had no visual means of support. I could no longer pay my rent. Now the truth is totally different. I do have money, but most of it is in checks that I have not cashed, you know. I rented some property, and that gave me a big $900 check. And then my friend sent me a check a week ago for $500. And then I got a notice that I could come to Franklin and tell stories for $300. And all of a sudden I'm solvent again. I have money again, but it's all in checks that I can't cash. So I'm sitting here now with no visible means of support. Question? Yeah.
How about your mother's side of the family? Did you ever have any contact with them? I know your mother left, but did you ever have any contact with her mother and father, with your grandparents?
Well, like my mother,
Yeah. Your mother and
she came back.
She came back.
I was 17, and I was in the back room reading funny books. That's all I did, was read funny books. I loved them. Get on my bicycle and I'd pedal all over Rose Cove and swap, trade comic books, come home with 30 I hadn't read, lock myself up in the back room and sit there and read them until I was half crazy. My granny knocked on the door. That's weird when your granny knocks on the door in your own bedroom, and she's Garnale. She's never called me Gary Neal. She hated my name. Couldn't say it. She says, Garnale. There's a woman out here in the road that says she's your mother. Now, I told her she's not setting foot in this house, because I've never forgiven her for going off and leaving you with us. But being fair, if you want to, you can go out there and talk to her, but she's not coming in here. And so I went out there in the road, and there was this beautiful woman. She was beautiful. Walked up right in front of her, and then the first thing she did is put her hand on my head, and that's the first time anybody had touched me with affection. And she says, Gary Neal, and said my name. Let's walk, you and me, let's walk down this road. I believe if I remember, this road just goes around in a big circle and comes back down by your house. Let's just walk and talk here. And we walked a short distance, and she says, wait a minute, son. Wait a minute, honey. Come here, sit down by me. And I sat down by her, and she says, give me your finger. I want to show you something. And so she took my finger and put it behind her knee. And there was a hole there. It was about that deep. And my finger went in that hole. And I said, what's that? And she says, my mother did that to me. I said, what do you mean? She heated a poker until it was white hot, and she stuck it in my leg. What are you talking about? Gary Neal, my mother was crazy. She dipped snuff till it was running out both sides of her mouth. She beat all of the children. All the kids, my brothers ran away. One of them sent me a postcard from Florida, and it said, Irene, get out before she kills you. And so we went on walking down the road and back around and back down. And we did it 3 times, and she told me where she lived, and she says, I'm going to send you money. I want you to come and live with me in Tennessee. And she did. She sent me the money, but I went, and it was a mistake. I should not have gone. She was married. Her husband had just said flat out to me, I ain't raising another man's child. And I was sitting at the table, and everybody was eating, and he would say, Irene, ask him if he wants some more green beans. Ask him if he wants some more cornbread. He wouldn't talk to me. And then I discovered I had a half-brother, and he fell on the floor and screamed and yelled and kicked, and he wouldn't stop until I left. And so they got me in the car and took me to the bus station and sent me home. That was the beginning of even a sadder story. But let me say about that, I've had a great life. I've taught school for 15 years. I taught for the Cherokees, and I wrote grants for them for 15 years. I paint a little, but it ain't no great shakes, but it's folk art. And I sell one now and then. And life goes on. I was even invited to go to Wyoming to talk to that was an incredible trip. A woman got on the stage while I was doing a program, which I had a popular program that I did called The Liar's Bench. And some of you know about that because some of you came to Liar's Bench. And here sits a letter right now that is recording me. Who knows all about the Liar's Bench? Yeah. I did well. I was paid $1,000 to fly to Wyoming to talk to a lawyer's college because they were inept at interviewing people who were witnesses. And I have a pretty good handle on how to interview anybody. And I stayed a week, and they treated me like I was special. And I came home. There's been other good things. North Carolina has given me a teaching award. They've given me Western Carolina has given me actually, I have an honorary doctorate from Western Carolina. I have about 6 folklore awards. I'm doing pretty well, all things considered, until just recently, when suddenly the money ran out. Question about anything? Yes.
Jerry, if you're in the mood, would you tell us about your preaching experience? When you were a kid, your preaching. I don't want to give it away. when you went, you decided to do some preaching when you were a kid.
And I signed that, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. What was it I did?
Well,
Oh, for heaven's sake, yeah, now I know what you're talking about, yeah. I sat on the porch every night with my grandparents. To tell you the truth, I loved it, I missed that very much. We sat there in the dark every night, and my granny was always shelling peas. And they would drop in a bucket, you know, don't, she's dropping it. My grandfather had the damnedest whetstone I've ever seen. It was huge, and he turned it with a handle, and the whetstone was in this vat full of water, and he sharpened all of his hoes, his size, and everything that he had to use to cut grass with every night. And my granny would tell me stories sometimes.